Thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about the negative effects of fear and how it holds us back in our life. Today we're talking about fear, and specifically, what are the negative effects of fear? Obviously, there are some negative health effects to fear. So fear it's an emotion, but there's also a physical part of fear. So whenever we go into fear mode, our body responds through that fight or flight reflex that is part of our old brain. And when we're in fear mode, it causes our brain to release certain chemicals. Now, fear can be effective and useful in the short term. It can keep us safe. That's what fear really is all about. It's to protect us and to keep us safe. But we live in a society today where many of the fears that we experience are conditioned fears that are really not real. And yet our body still responds the same way to that emotion of fear. And so our body releases the chemicals that prepares our body to fight or to flee. But the problem is, if there isn't an actual real threat, or we're in a place where we're experiencing fear on an ongoing basis, then it changes the level of the chemicals in our body, because we're always in that state of fear. And so what happens is it begins to wear our body down. And so we can begin to experience all kinds of health problems and negative health effects because of fear. So I don't want to talk as much about that today. We can talk about more of that in another video. But today I want to talk about the effects that fear has on our outcomes in life and the effects that fear has on our behavior. So fear is an emotion, and if you think about it, fear is an emotion that warns us or keeps us from doing a certain behavior. So if I walk upon a cliff and I lean over the cliff and I can see that if I continue to walk, I'm going to fall, well, that fear of falling keeps me from stepping off of the cliff. So fear is meant to hold us back or keep us from doing things that could cause us harm. But how many things in our life do we experience today that we feel fear of, that we think that it could cause us harm or it's a dangerous situation, but in reality, it really isn't. It's just a conditioned belief that we have either inherited or accepted throughout our life. In the book, The Four Agreements, it talks about in there that most of our beliefs are things that we have been conditioned and then we just accept, and we then make them our own. So we do the same thing with fear, and oftentimes that fear is not real. In fact, there's an acronym for fear that says fear stands for false evidence appearing real. And oftentimes, if we really look at the fear, we find that there's nothing there. There's another quote that says, "Fear knocked at the door, faith answered, and no one was there." So oftentimes when we really look at the fear, we find that it's not real. It doesn't exist. And then we can push ourselves through that situation, do the behavior or do the action, just by becoming consciously aware of that fear and realizing that that fear doesn't exist. You know, Harvard did a study a number of years ago. Well, they looked at fear, and what they found is that 93% of the things that we fear in life never happen. And the other 7% that do, we had no control over it anyway. So if you think about it, when we allow fear to control us, first of all, we're allowing things that the majority of times never even happen. stop us from doing what we want to do. And the other 7% of the time we couldn't have changed it anyway. So here's an example of this and how fear controls us and stops us from doing and experiencing all that we could do and experience in life. So a few years ago, we were hiking Zion National Park. The name of the hike is Angel's Landing. And it goes up the mountain and it gets to a place where it looks really scary because you're standing looking across and the mountain is really narrow. And then as the trail goes up the mountain, there are drop-offs to either side. And as a result, they have chains that are put on along the trail that you can hang on to help keep you safe as you go up the trail. Well, on this particular day, we had a group of students that were with us. And you go up the first part of the hike, which isn't scary, but it's fairly strenuous. And then you get to a flat area where you can kind of rest and take a break. And you can see the rest of the hike that you need to go on, again, which looking at it looks pretty scary. So we came upon this place and there were a group of people there that were looking at the rest of the hike. And they were trying to decide of whether or not they should continue on the hike or not. In addition to looking at the hike itself, there were storm clouds that were beginning to gather up in the sky. And the people there, because we visited with them for a minute, they were talking about whether or not they should continue on the hike, go the rest of the way, or if they should turn around and go back. Now, they were experiencing some fear just because of the hike itself, but added to that were these clouds that were coming in and the thought of, wow, what if it begins to rain? What if a storm hits? What if the wind picks up? It already looks scary enough. It already looks kind of dangerous. If this storm comes in, it could get really dangerous or really scary. As a result, this group of people decided that they would not continue on the hike. Our group, and part of this is because I had done this hike many times, I wasn't concerned. I knew that the hike was safe. The storm clouds didn't bother me. So we went ahead and went on the hike, got to the top, and the storm clouds disappeared. There was no wind, no rain, there was no storm, and it turned out to be a beautiful day. The other group, because of the fear of what might happen, chose not to continue their hike, and so they missed out on that experience. So think about that in life. How often do we allow the fear of what might happen prevent us from taking action and doing the thing? And what would our life be like if we were able to push through those fears? If we were able to do the things that we wanted to do, how different would our life be? So I encourage you to just be aware of that and to realize that, first of all, 93% of the things that we're afraid of happening don't even happen. The majority of times when we are experiencing fear, if we will look at the fear, we will see that there's nothing really there, that fear is based on a false belief. And instead, I encourage you to push through the fear. Most of what we want in life exists on the other side of fear. And all we need to do is push through it, and we can then experience really all that life has for us to enjoy. So push through your fears and create the life you love. Thanks for watching. If you've watched this entire video, then you must have enjoyed it. So I encourage you to subscribe to our channel and come back and visit us again tomorrow.